And it isn't equitable to get rid of standards. You're not preparing students well if you lower the standards to the point where it becomes so easy that they're actually not learning anything and still getting an A. Alrighty, so this caught my attention recently. It's time to cancel the word rigor. Here, if it's code for, quote, students, some students deserve to be here and some don't, then it needs to go. And it caught my attention because actually Heterodox Academy scholars wrote not a rebuttal per se, but sort of part rebuttal and part not, so which I found to be very interesting when I read that article, and so I wanted to come back to this one first. Time to cancel the word rigor. Far too many faculty members still think a challenging course should be like an obstacle race. You, as the instructor, set up the tasks and each student has to finish them, or not, to a certain standard within a set time. If only a few students can do it, that means the course is rigorous. We're not in that camp. Lately, we've been stuck in recent conversations around rigor, grit, and imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome has to do with the idea that you think you're not good enough, that you're doing it all off of luck and goodness knows what else, and you're going to be exposed as a fraud, those kinds of things. All three terms lay credit or blame on an individual when often it is the academic system that creates the constructs, and it's the system that should be questioned when it erects barriers for students to surmount or makes them feel that they don't belong. It's time we recognize rigor for the exclusionary concept that it is, and for the preferential practices it usually promotes. But it's not enough to eliminate a single word. To truly enact change, you have to take concrete actions. Faculty members can play an important role in countering outdated appeals to rigor. As instructors in humanities and social sciences fields, respectively, we both encounter damaging ideas about the concept at workshops and even in casual conversations. For some instructors, abandoning rigorous policies and assignments means lowering standards and watering down courses. We hear comments like, from a humanities instructor, "I really want to tell my students to engage in deep analysis and thinking. How can they do that if I just tell them what they have to do? Isn't that doing the assignment for them?" From a STEM instructor, that instructor has too many high grades on their exams. They are obviously not being rigorous enough. I am not here to handhold them. How will they fare in the real world if I don't ask them to do it now? Such rigorous approaches privilege students who already have high academic literacy or who are already adept at managing higher education's unofficial rules, routines, and structures, also known as the hidden curriculum. That's different. I'll have to go read a little bit more about that, but I would agree to that. There is sometimes some hidden things there. An emphasis on rigor doesn't necessarily build academic literacy or unpack the hidden curriculum. Rigor, setting standards, being very challenging for students, it really does actually help. And I'll tell you why. Not tell you why. I will give you an example. Let's put it that way. I used to tutor statistics all the time. And actually, I would make my exams when I would make mock exams for the students that were much harder than what I knew they were going to get. And the reason that I did that was to push them harder to be the best that they could possibly be. And what it ended up being is if they ended up getting a C on my exam, they aced their exam in class because they knew what they were doing. They knew the material inside and out at that point. And that was great because I made it intentionally a little bit tougher than it should have been to push them a bit harder. Having high standards is a good thing. And the notion that everybody should absolutely belong in college, what do you mean? Really, right? What do you mean that everybody should belong in college? There was an idea many years ago, and my own family screams about, I didn't want to go to college, but it was already a thing by then. You have to go to college if you want to do well in life was the myth that was promoted, which is not necessary, which, like I said, it's pretty much a myth. You don't need to go to college to have a successful life or a meaningful life. That's very untrue, and it's very deceptive and pushes people into taking on debt and things along that line because it's very expensive to go to college. I think I wrote this in an email to a colleague recently. everybody has their own telos, their own purpose with their life and something that they're meant to do, their ultimate purpose. And it isn't always what you first think it is. It isn't always what you first think your purpose is in life. And sometimes what you first think it is sends you down the road of going to the wrong major and what have you. And if you're not doing what is your ultimate purpose to do, there's a lack of fulfillment. As humans, we need fulfillment. Eudaimonia, when we talk about this, you need fulfillment. So the idea that students have to absolutely belong in college or what have you, or in a course where they are not necessarily prepared or qualified, that's not necessarily true. You can belong in college without necessarily being in the course that you think you need to be in to get to your dream job that really maybe is not your dream job after all. I'm a big fan more so of the idea of, parents, don't let your kids go right immediately to college, kind of thing. Make sure they wait until like their 20s. Get out there, get figuring out what do they really want. Because when you're fresh out of high school, most of the time you don't know what you really want. I was an exception to that. I knew where I wanted to go for the most part. But most of the time you don't know. So running right into college isn't necessarily the best thing when you're not 100% sure where you want your life to go and what you want to do. So that's things I point out there that are somewhat important. Anyway, so how can we have high standards while ensuring inclusive teaching practices? We have some ideas. Build plenty of structure into assignments. Make sure each assignment clearly conveys your expectations. You can build structure by specifying the assignment's genre, audience, and purpose. Here's a sample writing assignment to illustrate what we mean. Imagine you've been selected to present your research to the Mystery and Detective Fiction section of the 2021 Popular Culture Association meeting. Your conference paper will take up this question. How has detective fiction changed as it merges into new media? In approximately 3,000 words, make an argument about how the detective fiction genre has changed or not as it crosses into new media. To support your argument, compare a traditional print text with one from a different medium, television, film, podcasts, computer games. You should cite at least 2 academic journal articles that either support your claim or with which you disagree. We will work in class on finding appropriate sources using university databases. We will analyze sample conference papers and generate criteria for success in class. In that assignment, students can clearly see what they will be writing, for whom, and for what purpose. The criteria for success becomes what makes an effective conference paper, not what does this teacher want. Students may be aware of different genres of writing from other courses, and this assignment builds on that awareness. It gives a sense of how writers in different fields use evidence, make arguments, and present information. Structuring an assignment around genre, audience, and purpose can work in any discipline. Consider the different types of writing that you do in your own work: literature reviews, conference posters, public presentations, grant proposals, or, instead of instructor-driven assignments, invite students to be creative in showing what they've learned. For example, assign an essay, in which students develop their own guidance, parameters, media, genre, and purposes, with peer and instructor guidance. Or ask students to create digital compositions like podcasts and videos. Regardless of the format, be sure to clarify the genre, purpose, and audience. Okay, in which students develop their own assignment parameters. Yeah, aren't you supposed to be the one, if you're the instructor, setting the expectations of what they're supposed to learn and what kind of parameters there are for success? Yeah, this is the thing of allowing students who don't necessarily know what they're doing to guide the learning, which usually doesn't work because they haven't really learned all that much yet. Even in college, you are still learning if you're going into a specialized discipline. That actually doesn't really make all that much sense to me. Anyway, this would be the reason we learn. Deb has talked about this. I would actually love her thoughts on this particular aspect, so I may send this to her later. Showing students the process, the nuts and bolts of how to do the assignment, is not doing the work for them. If you go so far as to give them an answer, then yes, it is. But the nuts and bolts of how to do an assignment is something they're supposed to learn as part of the process, but also, get to their important things there. Okay. I'm going to skip down a little bit here. Some instructors may worry that all of this process work will take up too much class time, but these activities can be completed before class, posted on a course message board, or briefly discussed in class. For instance, students can take 5 minutes at the start of class to share their topic proposals with a partner. You can also set up peer groups. Okay. Develop a fair grading structure. Advocates of rigor often implicitly assume that the goal of the course is to rank students or weed out those who aren't up to par. On their syllabi, you'll see wording like students in the top 5% of grading scale will earn an A. Ranking students prior to even assigning a grade is commonplace in many courses. In instructors' mind, that assures a certain percentage of students will earn top grades, safeguarding them against any perception that their course is not rigorous. In the student's mind, such a policy implies that most of them won't make the cut for an A. The message, the instructor does not see all students as capable of success, and is intent on sorting those who can succeed from those who cannot. That's not a true statement. And that's not necessarily the message that is being sent either. That is not a true statement. Success in life does not necessarily equate to your success in a course. And that is part of figuring that out, is sometimes you do fail utterly in courses. I have done that. Atmospheric dynamics class, I got a 30% on one course in my atmospheric dynamics class. Still here, still have the PhD. Did just fine. Success is not dependent upon one class, and you should not necessarily assume that the instructor who does those things assumes the students are that all students are not capable of success. It depends upon what success in life is. It may not be in that particular class. Anyway. I'm trying to make sure I get enough time to get to the other articles. So what was the other thing they say? Commit to inclusive teaching. There's plenty of advice out there on how to be inclusive teacher, including this detailed guide. Faculty members who support inclusive teaching should be prepared to counter arguments for rigor. After all, these discussions come up frequently, not just in hallway conversations, but in high-stakes debate about curricula, admissions, placement, dual credit, grading policies, and assessment. Here are some suggestions. Stop using the term rigor. Ask your colleagues to stop using it. If rigor is code for some students deserve to be here and some don't, then it needs to go. Emphasize that students who have been admitted to your institution have already shown that they can meet high standards. Explain why instructors should work with students to help them achieve learning goals. Incorporate frequent low-stakes tasks to help students practice concepts and skills. Advocate course design principles that provide clear course expectations. Share research that shows how inclusive teaching and active learning can help improve student success and retention. Help your department or campus adopt policies that move away from grading on a curve. Often offer research and advice on grading alternatives such as mastery-based grading and contract grading that help instructors maintain a challenging course while helping every student meet the standards. Push against outdated notions of rigor personally and in the presence of others. Look for opportunities to intervene in institutional policies that seek to weed students out rather than invite them in. By all means, design a course that helps students either individually or in teams master concepts and skills that you deem important in your course. Set high standards and help. Okay, so wait, they just advocated for getting rid of standards and they put standards in? I'm confused. I may have misread something, but I could have sworn in this article they just advocated for getting rid of standards to a degree, and now they want standards back. Okay. And help as many students as you can to meet them. Perhaps most important, start with the assumption that they are all capable of success and deserve to pursue the academic discipline of their choosing. Hold on. This is a point of don't weed out students the way we see it. If we do our jobs right, perhaps the students will become enamored with our discipline as we are. If you're doing your job right, you're going to help a student find the discipline that works best for them. And it's not always going to be the one they dream of. And it's not always going to be the one that you want them to have. That's the best instructors I could ever find, are the ones who point out to me, hey, maybe this isn't the thing for you to do. Maybe this isn't what you should be doing with your life. Maybe you're better in this thing. I don't agree in this that it is a professor's job to get their students enamored with their own discipline. No, you should get your students enamored of learning and let them find what discipline is the best for them, that fulfills their telos, that deep need for purpose. Not pushing them into your own discipline because you want them there, or because they belong there in whatever weird sense of belonging. No, I don't agree with that. To the other article. This appeared in Heterodox Academy earlier today, actually. Canceling rigor for the sake of inclusion isn't really equitable or inclusive at all. Embracing rigor and inclusion. So let's see. We're going to try and make it through this relatively quick, but we'll see here. In a recent Chronicle of Higher Education article, Jordan Jack and Vijay Sathi, UNC Chapel Hill professors in rhetoric and comparative literature and psychology and neuroscience, respectively, assert it's time to cancel the word rigor, arguing it is both outdated and an exclusionary concept that professors use as a code for an elitist sorting mechanism that rewards only economically privileged students. Jack and Sathi suggests that professors invoke the word rigor to mean some students deserve to be here and some don't. Pitting rigor against inclusion like this makes rigor the latest battle in the campus culture war and positions faculty members, rather than institutional policies, as responsible for whether students succeed and perhaps even whether the economic inequalities in our society are eliminated. In response to the Chronicle article, David Randall of the National Association of Scholars argues that Jack and Sathi's suggestion that rigor is not inclusive is, quote, a stalking horse for different standards by race and sex. Ooh. I don't know that. I haven't looked at that particular article or what he said. Randall further asserts that instructors designing transparent assignments, as Jack and Sathi propose, treat college students as toddlers or machines rather than as capable of taking brief instructions and using imagination, initiative, and yes, background knowledge to produce a sufficient piece of work. For Randall, canceling rigor, quote, will damage universities and harm students in the name of helping them. I agree with Randall about the damage canceling rigor does. Besides, pitting rigor against inclusivity makes the rather insulting presumption that race and gender predict academic merit. Indeed, it does. Race and gender does not predict academic merit. And the fact of the matter, if you're going by the normative principle of normative principle of universalism in science, that doesn't matter. In the slides, you should not be using race and gender at all to say anything about the merit of somebody's work. And again, this is why I point these things out going on with higher education, because why? Higher education is the training ground for the next generation of scientists, and hence the reason things going on in academia affect the future of science. STEM in particular is, of course, my concern going on there. So it's always the reason why I think about what the heck is going on in higher education. However, rather than taking a side in this rigor war, I want to embrace rigor and inclusive teaching techniques that support students' transition to college and that give them a fair shot at learning. I design my assignments in the transparent style championed by Tilt Higher Ed because students, particularly historically underrepresented minority and first-gen students, learn more and perform better when assignments are created in this way. Admittedly, I don't know exactly what this is, so I would leave it to others. This might be something for others to look at. I incorporate the principles of universal design for learning, for instance, by incorporating fun forms of creative expression in my serious, rigorous courses. I make appropriate accommodations for students who have documented disabilities, which you should. Admittedly, you absolutely should. I reach out to or seek targeted interventions for students who are disengaged or not turning in work. In short, in these ways, I do everything I can to help students learn. But if they don't or can't do the work to meet those standards, I should not have to pretend they did it for fear of being ostracized and deemed an insensitive elite. Thank you very much. That is the correct thing there. I should not have to pretend that they did it for fear of being ostracized and deemed an insensitive elite. It is not an elitist thing to have students meet high standards in there. Rigor should not promote any preferential practices other than recognizing students who learn the material. As others have noted in greater detail, rigor helps students develop skills that enable them to become engaged and nuanced thinkers, as well as responsible and competent workers in their chosen fields. Rigor is part of helping students develop understandings of complex arguments and ideas that are ambiguous or contentious. To their credit, Jack and Sathi don't explicitly advocate that we dumb down courses or teach to the lowest common denominator. They suggest that they don't really want to reduce that thing that we are not supposed to call rigor. They explain showing students the process, the nuts and bolts of the assignment, is not doing the work for them. In fact, you may well be asking the students to do more, not less. Here they underscore that transparency and rigor can coexist. But their argument, made in the name of inclusion, actually admits to wanting to lower standards when they start talking about students who cannot complete all the practice problems because they have work or caregiving responsibilities. Even transparent assignments still require time to complete. They still require a student to work hard. The nuts and bolts might be clear, but the assignments still require students to make the time to read study the materials, do the library research, formulate strong arguments, memorize certain facts, and develop specific skills. The authors state their opposition to the approach where you, as the instructor, set up the tasks and each student has to finish them, or not, to a certain standard within a set time. But even if instructors use a mastery-based grading system, we still teach a class within a limited time frame, typically a 15-week semester. In other words, there is a certain standard we do operate within a set time. We can have students write a non-traditional rule-abandoning essay, but we should not make it uncollege. Very good choice of words, actually. I very much agree with that. And that is the problem with their thing of having the students do it on their own time. What guarantee are you going to have the students do it at all? They still have to do it on the deadline. And if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And you shouldn't be rewarding them for not doing something. That doesn't teach discipline and resilience either. I concur with Randall that banishing rigor, quote, will damage universities and harm students in the name of helping them. But unlike Randall, I don't want to stop at that observation. I want us to recognize that there are students with caregiving responsibilities and work responsibilities. Indeed, at least 1/4 of U.S. college students are raising children and 1/4 are working full-time in the paid labor force and find institutional accommodations for them. That I can agree with. It is really, really tough. I know a friend of mine who started his PhD at the same time I did. He has 4 kids. And he finished after I did, or he was working like half time on it and what have you. So it was very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to do a degree and actually finish at the same time and finish quickly. The more rigor is framed as the enemy of these. The more rigor is framed as the enemy of these traditionally underrepresented students, be they single parents, students from underrepresented racial groups, first-gen students, or poor working students, the more pressure we place on instructors to be the solution to problems facing higher education today. But the instructor's primary job is to use their expertise to teach their material and assess students' mastery of the knowledge and skills they teach, as they are demonstrated in the course assignments. This is where a student's grade comes from. Rigorous grading is neither arbitrary nor capricious. It is designed to identify who knows the material, not who grew up rich. You can be rich and still flunk a class. You can be very rich and still flunk a class. Institutional solutions for the problems these students face include scholarships, financial aid packages, pathways to attend college part-time rather than encouraging students who have multiple commitments to finish in 4, saying finish in 4 years is the euphemism there, and subsidized on-site daycare centers and after-school programs. University students' fees could be reallocated to services that help students overcome barriers to academic success. Specifically, institutions charging students big athletic fees could instead charge students a fee that would give food insecure, overworked, and parenting students more time to study. These structural change, I don't know how you would structure that, but that is an interesting idea in here, given that there's a huge amount of athletics programs that are gigantic and probably don't necessarily need the money, or they could raise the money a different way. The structural changes would relax the constraints such students have around time without relaxing the constraint of learning and rigor. Policies, not just professors, could be more inclusive. Policies that enable a broad range of students to face fewer barriers and be fully engaged in my classroom would ensure that all students get a chance to learn and contribute, rather than lower my standards, which harms all students, or take on the blame for rigorous learning, which slows me from teaching well. Institutional changes, along with inclusive approaches, could work to support rigorous teaching and students' academic growth. Changing the structure of support so that students can get a solid education treats students as capable of learning the material, whereas canceling rigor for the sake of inclusion is not really inclusive or equitable at all. Making it easier for students by lowering academic expectations is an individual instructor-level solution that robs these busy students of the best version of the material I can offer, the education they deserve. Rather than framing individual faculty practices as the answer, we should be seeking institutional policies and practices that help us achieve our goals. Such policies would aim to give all students who are admitted to college, because they are intellectually capable of meeting its demands, the opportunity to meet rigorous standards of learning and growth. So that is in Heterodox Academy, and it's an interesting idea, because it is true that you'll have students that, they're parenting, they've got other things going on, things like that. Gender and race do not at all indicate anything about merit. And it isn't equitable to get rid of standards. You're not preparing students well if you lower the standards to the point where it becomes so easy that they're actually not learning anything and still getting an A. That sets them up for failure later in life. And for scientists, it sets them up to be bad scientists because they're expecting it to be easy. And I hate to break it to you, sometimes being a scientist is a very tough, rigorous process where you're dealing with all sorts of things going on, be it deadlines and funding and proposals and research and all this kind of stuff. And time management is always a challenge. And you need to learn a lot of those skills while you can in college. So making it easy doesn't necessarily prepare them for being better in life. And it certainly isn't equitable, to use their own phrase. That's it. Tell me what you think of these two articles. They will, of course, both be in the description. If you like the video, hit the like button on the way out the door. Subscribe to the channel. Share the video. Comment on the video. I'd love to know your thoughts. Don't forget, you can come on over to Locals, sophia.locals.com. We'll be doing Thursday Thoughts tomorrow. Later today, actually. We will be doing the Thursday Study Review on YouTube, premiering at 7 p.m. Central Time, and it is going to be on the rise and fall of rationality in language. It's going to be a very interesting article. And afterwards, don't forget, local supporters get to live chat with me in Locals on the article and other topics of the week. That's it for now. I will see you all next time. Until next time, I'm Adrian. I hope you stay curious.